Flashback 1.6 The Party of Adventurers. Deja vu. I spent the next week in the hospital undergoing a lot of tests and a train of investigators, including 2 people now from the FBI. Apparently, Aaron Graywell was upgraded to the FBI's America's Most Wanted list now. All because he blew up my house and apparently attempted murder on me, never mind his prior crimes spanning multiple states. I felt a little offended when the psychiatrist came by to me. They asked questions like, "How are you feeling? Why do you think this happened to you? Do you personally feel it is your responsibility in some way? What role or responsibility do you think you played in all of this? Are you depressed? Are you suffering from anxiety? Do you have PTSD now?" Their questions felt judgmental and even condemning at times, even though it was my house that blew up. I am sure they're just doing their jobs, but it felt like they were gunning to catch me in some wrongdoing or falsehood, like somehow I caused the destruction of my house myself. I felt awful, physically, emotionally, and intellectually. And here they were, pushing guilt and responsibility onto me despite being the victim. I kept thinking about $250 billion. That was my North Star in the moment to get through all the pain and suffering and insanity that I was dealing with. The information shared by the investigators helped me piece things together after I went dark from the explosion. Apparently, the explosion was so powerful that it hurled huge chunks of the garage at the squad car and threw it into the air, where it landed upside down after flipping and rolling. Her car's frame base, facing upward to the sky having flipped, shielded both Miss Taylor and me from massive falling debris, shrapnel, and chunks of the house that had concussive forces as well hitting the car. It was crazy to think that Miss Taylor locking us in the car, my being trapped, and it being thrown upside down actually saved our lives. With so long, over a week, just waiting in the hospital, I had time to think on all so many things. I couldn't help but connect how my sister died suddenly from a stroke, and how Miss Taylor could have died from a C4 bomb in my furnace that detonated the gas from the remnant line into the gas main to create such a huge, massive, major explosion. Both incidents were sudden and without any real warning. No one woke up that day and expected that it might be their last day and that they would lose their house or their car or so much. Life can just end in a blink of an eye. That is terrifying. That is sobering. When will my sudden death be? Will it be sudden? Is this hell just a sign of my difficulty setting in real life? The last few weeks certainly have been very, very insane. FBI agent Jose Ramirez introduced himself and informed me that they were confident Aaron Graywell had now skipped town, given the heat that they had now put to find him. They still hadn't found him. But Agent Ramirez asserted that Graywell was too smart to linger around a search epicenter. Ramirez gave me his card and asked that I call him should I find anything in the future that might add benefit. Deja vu again. Instead of Deputy Taylor asking me to call her should I discover information and giving me her card, it was FBI agent Jose Ramirez doing exactly the same scripted thing this time around. Okay, another stay in the hospital has finally come to an end. I literally must pick myself up from the ashes and metaphorically find the phoenix within me and rise again. I needed a new wallet, a new ID, new credit cards, new clothes, new home, new everything. Everything I had was gone. It was fortunate my wife was in the UK. It seemed a bit ironic that I actually still had my car. I guess not everything was destroyed. It had survived the explosion because it was not there. It had broken on the side of the freeway off-ramp, and so I had a rental car for the interim until I could get it repaired. So, I guess at least money wasn't going to be a problem. My insurance was also going to fix everything, rebuild the house, buy clothes, do all these things, but over how much time? I didn't have a house. I didn't have anything in the moment, and it was going to take a while for the insurance to do anything. And I had to be in Ireland soon. Upon checking my bank account, I found my balance at Chase had swelled $50,000. Woohoo! Looks like that law firm did deposit the money. They absolutely are real and legit. None of this is going to matter when I get my $2.5 billion. I still had a few weeks before my Ireland trip where I would allegedly become a multi-billionaire. It was a surreal moment to think about everything I'd been through. I could just drop dead at any moment from hereditary health risks, and at the same time I could become one of the wealthiest people in the world in under a month. And everything was entirely out of my hands and influence. It was almost as if my destiny had been written without my involvement. Everything I had done in my life did not bear any effect on what was happening. The most concerning thought that occurred to me was that I should try and find some allies that might want to join me on this trip to Ireland. It was apparent after being hospitalized twice in under a month that I am not the uber warrior that my game playing had led me to believe. Moreover, going to a foreign country alone felt, well, unwise. I concluded that I needed real people with real skills to help me. I contemplated what sort of people would be most beneficial to me and how I might get them in short order to join me on an international trip to a last will and testament reading in Ireland. It was almost like I had to form an adventure party for a role-playing game. It's funny how life can sometimes mimic fiction, even if it was a dark and difficult life, at least right now. It seemed that I needed an adventurer's party. And the fastest way to motivate most people to do something quickly in my life experience is, well, money. I needed to hire people. Yes, I needed to pay people. Of course, I learned in every adventure game and story that mercenaries cannot be trusted in the thick of things, so you need to find kin, friends, or people that otherwise have a shared or vested interest in your cause. That $50,000 provided by the Irish law firm seemed to me like a lot of money, and it was for an individual. Unfortunately, I quickly discovered that it is surprisingly expensive. Very much money, if you want to hire somebody. Once you consider the premium cost of getting someone to drop everything, that's expensive. Once you introduce potential risks to their well-being, that's expensive. Once you commit to a long duration like a month, that's expensive. Even calling bodyguard companies proved difficult as they wanted a $25,000 monthly rate for a one-person expert personal bodyguard that would leave the country, and I would have to cover all expenses. They also required $35,000 upfront as a retainer for potential costs and injuries. That seemed crazy excessive to me. So I decided to get a little more creative with finding people and see what kind of travel arrangements were possible for my Irish law firm trip. I concluded it would be incredible to have a trained police officer as an ally on this adventure. Deputy Andrea Taylor would be a great partner to come with me on this trip. If she was not inclined to do so, well, maybe she would recommend someone that would be more cost-effective as a bodyguard than these expert companies. Katie Snowett, the waitress from the Big Hut Roadside Cafe, she had given me her contact information on that note, and she visited me in the hospital just to see how things were going and how I was doing. She seemed genuinely compassionate and interested in what was going on. I imagined she'd be a great people person, and she would help smooth over any kind of relationship challenges or interactions with people. Something that I have noticed lately I might be in need of. And if I am totally honest with myself, I liked her. It'd be nice to have her along, just to get to know her too. My friend, I think he's a friend, HR Bob, or Human Resources Bob, a nickname that I gave Bob simply because he worked in human resources at Microsoft when I worked there as a studio manager. He was probably one of the only guys that told me the way it was and was straight with me. He was certainly at least a good friend at work. I just didn't know if he was a friend outside of work. His insight had always been valuable to me during these frustrating times at work, at late. So I thought, he got me. Like no one else has got me before. So I figured he'd likewise might be insightful dealing with all the will reading and people and emotions and stuff like that. Between Katie and Bob, I figured that kind of stuff would be dealt with. Bob seemed more than a typical work friend, unlike most work friends that are, not much more than an acquaintance that we feign personal connections with so we can pass the time at lunches or at work events as if we cared about each other. They would never help me move or would want to help me, frankly, with anything outside of work, so I figured that defined them not as true friends. They were work friends or acquaintance friends. They would not even call or text me outside of work on any topics. I think that defines someone as less of a friend. They don't even call or text outside of work topics, and usually never outside of work hours, unless, of course, we're on a work trip. Bob Sanchez was a real friend, I think, even though I met him at work. He's the kind of buddy that would help me move, I think. If I was on a wild adventure like this, I think HR Bob was someone that I would want there to have my back, or like the military apparently says, to have my six. With my vision of bringing a longtime friend, bodyguard muscle, and persuasive people, I decided it was prudent to confirm that I could actually bring these three people with me. I called the law firm and asked for that Sarah McGillivray, and to my surprise, she was still there in the office, no matter the hour. "Yes, Mr. Seaborn, how may I help you?" she asked in her cute Irish accent. She must have presumed it was me from my American accent, seeing as I did not introduce myself at all. She was right, but it was a little creepy. I suppose it's just one more creepy straw piled on this tapestry of wacky, alarming things that have been going on. I asked. I was wondering what was involved if I wanted to bring maybe 2 or 3 friends with me to the will reading like was mentioned. I worried they wouldn't really cover the cost of my bringing anyone with me, much less bringing 3 people. I waited for what felt like an eternity. It was probably 5 seconds. But that 5 seconds is an eternity when you're worrying about something. At least it was for me. Silly, but again, that is a long time to dangle on the phone. She finally answered. "No problem, Mr. Seaborn. Just provide me with their full legal names, birth date, passport information, and any special instructions, such as dietary requirements that they may have. I'll book them immediately along with your arrangements. I will update them once you provide me with your party's information. I will email and next day air the tickets and confirmations to you." Sarah McGillivray was like a sweet-voiced machine with her pleasant demeanor, efficiency, and readiness to tackle matters. Sometimes a little monotone in voice, but she was a machine. I was caught off guard, totally not expecting that she would approve my whimsical ask of 3 people so quickly. "Well, I need to check with the people first to see if they're really going to go with me, and then I'll get that information to you," I told Sarah. I didn't know who would actually go with me. I still wondered if I could even hire waitress Katie, Deputy Taylor, and HR Bob to come with me on such short notice, and would their jobs let them go? I mean, it's not like I had enough money yet to cover all their lost wages in the future. I could just cover, the month or so. But of course, if I got $250 billion, I could hire them for the rest of their lives. I guess I had to explain that to them. I figured that would give me an empathic, charming, people person support from Katie, Bob's people strategy expertise from HR, and Deputy Taylor's combat skills. And of course, I was the centerpiece hero and protagonist for our party. It sounded like a perfect team, if I could just get them all to go with me. Sarah replied, "Understood, Mr. Seaborn. I will reserve 4 first-class cabin seats for the flights, have a limousine pick you and your party up at the airport, and block luxury rooms for each of you in the best hotel in the area, the Stratus. Once you confirm the individuals, I'll update the bookings. I will need the information at least 2 weeks before the trip to safely make sure the changes are made from the reserved tickets. That's next week. Will that work for you?" Sarah asked. Yes, that's amazing. So I can bring 3 people?" I replied excitedly. "Yes, Mr. Seaborn. No worries. No problem. Shall I proceed with this plan of arranging for 4 total people, yourself plus 3 others?" she inquired, kindly. "Yes, I am absolutely confirmed. Please." Back to reality. Dr. Caselli interrupted my storytelling. "We are out of time today, Richard. We will resume on 2 days' time. Your writing things down has proved very beneficial. Please write as much as you can remember so we can have a good session like we've had today. We can start by resuming some of your childhood memories, and I am sure we will have an opportunity to discuss some more current memories as well, just as we did today." And with that, I was dismissed. Abrupt, unceremoniously, just done. A medical assistant entered the room as if she knew precisely to the second when the session ended. She turned off the iPad, with Doctors Hyder, Garcia, and Brandon's windows vanishing with its power. She promptly exited without making eye contact or saying a word. Caselli rose and left the room likewise, without any further words. Not even a nod or a handshake or a simple fist bump. Nothing. The talkative Caselli was done for the day. It felt very much like the staff just turned me off like a television show. They were done for the day, and so I was no longer relevant or of any interest. Then entered a big psych ward orderly who put a pair of soft handcuffs on me and escorted me back to my modern-day, comfy, padded room psych ward jail cell. There, I would wait to be summoned again, in hopes to plead my case and pray for my freedom. Flashback 1.7 Psychiatrist Assessment. The next morning, I was returned to the psych ward's psychiatric session room, where I waited 15 minutes or so until Dr. Caselli entered the room. Following an insecure-seeming cordial greeting, Caselli settled into his command chair, as if sitting down on his psychiatric throne of judgment. The medical assistant from the prior day entered the room and set up the familiar iPad and opened the chat window connections with Doctors Hyder, Brandon, and Garcia. They too extended their standard, rehearsed greetings. I felt like an ancient TV show called The Waltons, where every single night a character bade good night to everyone in his large family. Good night, so-and-so. Good night, John Boy. Good night, so-and-so. Good night, John Boy. Forever, it felt like that. And with every Waltons episode ending in the same way, it made every episode ending not really that special once you became accustomed to the shtick. And so, in the same way, I felt the doctor's greeting was essentially pointless, because it was the same thing every single time that they came and went. Let's not waste any more time. I would like us to discuss your adventure from yesterday. Richard, you played hooky from work, though you said you needed a mental health day. You assert you have never played hooky before, but suddenly it was okay to you. Why? What changed, Richard? Caselli continued. It is not hooky, Richard, if you need a day for sanity. It is an effective focus to improve your productivity. You challenged a powerful and dangerous man without any fear or worry in a restaurant because he did not pay his bill. Dine and dash, as you labeled it. Richard, your cavalier behavior reinforces your lack of awareness of danger and disregard for your own personal safety. We heard about your consequential beating and being knocked unconscious by that rogue murderer, Aaron Graywell. You met a waitress named Katie Snowett and a deputy named Andrea Taylor following your defeat. We learned that Aaron later sabotaged your car and blew up your house, and that you were hurled into the air while inside the deputy's police car as it flipped while your house exploded, the car landing upside down, resulting in you being hospitalized. In fact, you were hospitalized twice from these incidents, both including severe head trauma that translated to your being unconscious, likely resulting in one or more concussions, or worse. You expressed a recurring need for social interaction and human contact, noting how valuable it would be for the waitress Katie and Deputy Taylor to become friends of yours. Your isolation and loneliness are evident. They can have deleterious effects on your psyche, Richard, and they could magnify your emotional lability. We should pay attention to your dependence on others and relationships for the purpose of your own validation. The critical question here, Richard, is how much do you exist for yourself versus do you exist for others? Your isolation and loneliness can also magnify your emotional lability or trigger PBA episodes. You spent very little time in your story detailing your injuries or hospitalization, suggesting that maybe you disregard your own well-being. You did not discuss losing your job, as I had asked you to do. A likely con was played on you, Richard, that you wanted to believe your inheritance. And so you accepted it as the truth, that you were the sudden beneficiary of $250 billion. Richard, you must know how ludicrous that sounds, right? Don't you? Caselli did not want an answer, as it was obviously rhetorical, with not even a second for me to reply. He pressed onward. You note that you were given $50,000 from this law firm that you had called Midnight and Associates. There was a $50,000 deposit according to your bank records. However, it appears to have been either a severance deposit or a stock sale from your employer because of your employment termination. It appears that you used the deposit to validate your delusions and fantasies. Richard, you experienced nightmares as you drifted to sleep about talking voices and warnings. Yet you concluded the voices were real. It is telling, Richard, that so many years later, you remain convinced that those voices were real. It seems you needed to have a quest to justify your actions, and so concocted this ludicrous, fantastic misadventure scenario, complete with supernatural voices telling you what to do. I am sure our esteemed panel may have additional insight on your flashback story. However, in the interest of efficiency, I think my summary is sufficient for now. Richard, please tell us about your early childhood, continuing where you left off, Caselli directed me. It was remarkable to me that Dr. Caselli was so rude even to the other doctors, just as he was rude to me. He literally gave each doctor only enough time to employ their introduction scripts before jumping straight into his judgmental summary of how my flashback demonstrated that I was crazy and obviously messed up. I took a deep sigh and began telling the tale of my childhood trials and tribulations as I was directed. But I challenged Caselli. We did talk about my exiting my job. You said you had records on it. From my perspective, they discriminated against me because of my older age. They said things to me like, hey, old school. Yeah, I was old school. That was my name to them. Ultimately, the executive vice president and I did not get along. And for those very reasons, he pushed a wrong and bad review on me, which was inconsistent with all of my top reviews throughout my entire life, including that company, Microsoft. And so, I left the company. Done. There was nothing magical or sinister or left out. I did and am moving on. I used Caselli's trick and just bulldozed on to the next topic.